Okay, so as I'm working on day 16 and Dr. Angela gets to the install of our first package officially in the course, it made me stop and revise my instruction because I'm going to give you this link in the README file, but for VS Code, this virtual environment setup is a little different. Actually, I should say a bit more different than I realized for something like PyCharm, because PyCharm, when you set up these projects that she shows, automatically does. And I saw this in the video today, and I actually debated this with somebody last semester. Is that when she sets up the project, it actually does a virtual environment automatically. So anyway, I'm just going to show you. And then in this case, it's Mac. So, take it as a grain of salt. But I also will say to you that there is some great documentation out there. I don't think this is the one, but this is one of the ones because I ended up having to delete so I could walk you through it. But if you search for, um, just search for VENV, and actually you can be more specific. You can talk about Python virtual environments. Okay. But I'm just going to walk you through at least, and I think this should be helpful to do this. Now, why do we do this? We do this because for me, I am very particular about what I install in your system, as I hope you are as well. So, but there's also just so much wonderful benefit from installing things like in this case, Pretty Table, right? So there's the best of both worlds, and then there's just the pragmatic for me that because I have so much in my system, I don't want to install a lot of things that I can't isolate. Because right now, if I was to do, and this is the install command at the command line, if I was to do this, then Pretty Table would be available to me wherever I am on my system, which really means it installs globally. And I don't want to do that. I only want to install it in a very isolated, almost a sandbox, if you've ever heard that term, but way so that when I'm done with it, I can delete it. Okay. So I'm going to walk you through my instructions again today. I did look at them and I updated it just a little bit because I thought, well, this would be a good time to do it. Because some of you may be looking at installing virtual environments for your Dev 1 that's coming up this week. So hopefully this is timely. Again, this is only if you're using third-party libraries, and because we now have got to that place in the course where she's going to do that, just know that if you run the install command without doing this, this is of course your choice. I just want to tell you how if you do this for dev projects, you have to do this. And I really want you to just know this. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is look at my instruction. And what you're going to do is create a directory, right? So in this case, I'm going to do this outside of VS Code. Okay. And here's the command. Now, when I say dir name, now, so this is Python 3, I think, and I'm going to do this just with Python. I think when I wrote this, for some reason, when I was looking at the instruction, but Python and Python 3 is generally the same depending on your system setup. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to copy this. And then I'm going to open my terminal on my Mac. Okay, so for me, here's terminal, right? And so what I need to do is I need to navigate to my directory. Okay, and then this is going to be in my private, right? And this is 100 days, and then I'm going to day 16. Okay, because this, and I'm just going to do ls to show you the files that are in there right now. Okay, so I have the main.py that we're getting ready to use this with. Okay, so now again, this is for Mac, and the reason you'll see in a minute, you might be able to do this on Windows at the command line inside of VS Code. I've just found this works much better if I work outside, and then I will run VS Code and I'll show you how I do that. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look at that command again. I copied it before, so I'm going to paste it. But what I'm going to do is the dir name, I'm actually, and this is fairly common, is this is the command and this is the directory name. And then I'm going to take off 3 because I don't need it. So what this is going to do is immediately it's going to create that directory inside of my day 16 folder. Okay. It's going to take it just a minute. So it did create it. Now, how do I know it created it? If I do ls, I actually see that directory. And I'm going to show you in VS Code what's actually in that directory in a moment. So that's step one. So step two is now I have to activate this environment. Okay. And that's the step here. Okay. Now it's really important that you follow along if you're doing this. Right. So I'm going to paste that. But now, again, because I name mine, if you name yours something different, totally fine. Just make sure you're using the exact one. And so what this is going to do, it's going to run source. It's going to run this file that's located in this directory. And when we do this, you'll notice that my command line for terminal is going to change. And what it's going to do now, it's going to reflect that new directory. Okay. Now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and run VS Code, but I'm going to run it a little differently. Okay. And there's a couple of just nuances here. I want, we could get into the weeds detail wise, but if I just did code dot space, what it would do is it would make this day 16 what's called my root folder, which would be totally fine. But I'm actually going to do this. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to back up one directory to my 100 days. And actually, I could have done this twice like this, right? Backed up a couple of directories like this. Now, you're going to see in a minute why I do this. This is not necessarily a requirement. It just makes it cleaner for me to do some of these steps. So let me just do a clear real quick. And now I'm going to run code space dot. And what this is going to do is say, now run VS Code from this current directory. Take it a minute. It runs. Okay, and there's that setup that I did over here, and there's that directory. Okay, and if you wanted to see what was in that directory, right, you can see that there's the pip install. So this, what it does is basically takes a Python version that you're running, your current version, and it puts it in a little, it copies it into this little directory. Not little, it's actually quite big. But in here, you can look through to see what everything is installed. And actually, Pretty Table, I believe, is in the library. Oh, I haven't installed it yet. It's not there yet. I'm like, why isn't it there? It's not there because I haven't installed it. Now I'm going to go ahead and drop my terminal. I'm going to go ahead and open a new terminal. And then at this point, when I open a new terminal, I can see in VS Code, actually, I'm running that virtual environment. Okay. So now what I can do, I'm going to leave this running because I'll need this and when I'm all done and I want to just get finished. So now I'm going to grab that Pretty Table install. So this is going to run Python. It's going to run a pip install. It's going to do a Pretty Table install. But the key is going to be, and let me go ahead and paste it so it runs it. When it does that, it's only installing in this folder structure right here. Okay, which is great. And that's the way I wanted to do. And now let me show you, should be right here now in that directory. So instead of being in my entire system, it's only in one place. Now, I did actually skip a step. I realize that here, and you can do this at any point, but the reason you're setting this folder up, and in this case, we're referring to the folder, is in my git ignore, and I want you to see this happen real time. That git ignore that's setting at that private repo, I would open that up and watch what will happen. I want you to see this actually what happens in day 16 when because this git ignore is for the entire folder. If I just type env, what it will do is it will go through and find and not version control what's in here, because when somebody else runs my, if they're going to install my system, my required packages, right, then you don't want to push those to GitHub. You want the user to install them, and it's one of the steps in here where you create this requirements.txt, and then when somebody gets your code, they install it. In this case, when I get it, right? So, but in this case, let's just go ahead now that I have that, and I'm going to go ahead, and you do need to version control, update that git ignore and push it to the server, okay, before you, but I'm going to go back to now that main, right? And I should have shown you this before, and I could show you it afterwards, but if I don't do this step and I just install it on my global system, it will work. But in my virtual environment, it will not work until I'm running in a virtual environment. By the way, the other way you know you're running in a virtual environment is go into command and go into select interpreter. And for my case, I could select that here. And that only shows up because I ran the visual code after I had run the activate. Okay, so now I can continue on running the rest of the code that Dr. Angela wants me to, which is fun, and create that fun little table in there as well. But what I want to show you is like the final step here, right? So now that I've run all my code and I'm done, then what I would do is go ahead and exit out of VS Code. And then again, if you were doing this for dev, then you would run another command at the command line, which is pip freeze, that creates this requirements. Matter of fact, it wouldn't hurt. Let's go ahead and do that actually right now. Hit my command line just to show you, right? So what I'm going to do actually is I need to now go back to my directory. So sorry, this is not the most efficient way here. Yeah. Oh, actually, just here. Private, and then I'm going to go 100 days. I'm going to go day 16. Cool. Okay. And so actually what I can do here is just going to paste that command here. And what it's going to do, and you'll see this, is it'll end up creating, I'm going to have a new file called requirements.txt. And what that then signals, if I'm installing your code for dev, now this is a conversation about dev, but it still works, right? And I'm still in my virtual environment. So the last thing I would do, again, this step is only if you're using this for your dev work. Otherwise, you can skip this because it's not important for that part of it, okay, unless you're just doing this today's work. So once I do deactivate, because I'm in my virtual environment, I hit enter. Notice what happens is my command prompt then changes to reflect I'm no longer in the virtual environment. And what I would do now is just start VS Code. Now, normally how I do start it, I open up the folder, and watch what's going to happen is that pretty table. Oh, now look at the other thing that happened here is because I had selected this before. I'm going to select my interpreter. I'm going to do this one. And as soon as I do that and I drop out my terminal, do a new terminal, okay, no longer has the virtual, and this is now broken because I am not running in the virtual environment, okay? But you can still see the folder, right? The ENV, right? And this should have actually oh, I haven't version controlled this yet, oh no, it is actually graying it out, which is great. And you do have this, right? Which is the requirements.txt that I would use on my system to install whatever libraries you were using. So in this video, I showed you two things, really. I showed you how to set up virtual environments related to our day 16, 148, and 149. But I also extended the conversation to say, if you're going to be using virtual and third-party libraries for your dev work, then you're going to need to walk through this process because I will not install libraries globally. So I kind of combined two things. And then this is my updated instruction, which I will also give you a link to. I hope this helps you understand a little more because this can be a little tricky walking through this. I know Nate has run into some challenges, but it's also a little different on Windows and Mac, which always makes things more challenging. All right, see you later.